Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. Today, we focus on the future for Indiana's top two political parties. Over the past week, Indiana Democrats and Republicans have chosen their leaders for the next 4 years. For Republicans, it will be 4 more years of Chairman Kyle Hupfer. The party's state central committee unanimously reelected him to a second term after he guided Governor Eric Holcomb to a huge electoral win in 2020. And let's welcome in newly reelected Indiana Republican Party Chairman Kyle Hupfer. Kyle, good to see you. Congratulations on another 4 years in office there, sir, Chairman. What are the plans for the next 4 years?
Well, listen, our goal is to stay at the top. You know, we've done a lot of work over the last 12 years with policies that are good for Hoosiers, that are solutions-based and are forward-looking. And so that's the most important thing, is to continuing delivering for Hoosiers at the state level, at the national level, and at the local level. And as long as we do that, we'll be in good shape as a political party.
You've heard Democrats specifically say that there's a civil war within the Republican Party. You got pro-Trump people on one side and anti-Trump people on another side. Your thoughts?
Listen, we've always had differences within our party, but philosophically, I think our core beliefs are still what they are: freedom, smaller government, lower taxation. Those are things that go across the board for Republicans in Indiana and across the country. And so I think as long as we focus on that, and now we have obviously a common opponent in Joe Biden, who is trying to, take this country south, we'll be in good shape.
Who represents the voice of the Indiana GOP? Governor Eric Holcomb, who has been really focused on Indiana and the issues here, or those like Congressman Jim Banks, who has been very vocally pro-Trump and spoken very anti-President Biden and his administration?
Well, I don't think there's any Republicans out there speaking well of President Biden and his administration. I mean, some of the policies that are putting in place, taking away our energy independence, putting our border at risk. Those are things that really no one is comfortable with on the Republican side of the ticket. I do think probably a governor and our legislators here in Indiana are probably more focused on Indiana. I think the folks who go to Washington get drawn into more national and international issues just by the nature of the job. So I think they're both focused on helping their own constituents and representing them. That probably the local elected officials are probably a little bit more focused on Indiana just by nature of their job. Since
we were talking about President Biden, your thoughts on him in his first couple of months in office?
It's bad for the American people. We knew this was coming. These are the things that he and the progressive wing of his party, like Nancy Pelosi and AOC, have talked about. They will try to push every far left agenda item that they can. They're now talking about, HR 1 and SR 1, which would completely gut election integrity for the future of the American people. They ended the Keystone Pipeline, which took away American jobs and is risking our energy independence, which we had built under President Trump. And we now have the biggest border crisis that we've had in the history of the country because, again, they won't follow solution-based oriented policies. And that's what we have to do. We have to continue to put America first.
Let's talk voting right now, because a lot of people say that Republicans are trying to suppress voting. When you hear that type of language, specifically about this bill that's floating around right now, how do you respond?
Well, I don't know of any bill that's floating around. Indiana has, long had a history of integrity in their elections and strong belief of the citizenry of Indiana. We tested it here just recently. They believe that our elections have a high degree of integrity and that they can be trusted. Listen, if having to show your ID, which you show everywhere in life, is voter suppression, I just simply disagree with that. We want every single eligible legal voter to vote, but only once. And we have a system here in Indiana. You can now vote 28 days before the election in person. You have multiple ways to vote by mail. We had a record level of turnout in this past election. I think that we have a system in Indiana that fosters significant, easy access to vote for any Hoosier that wants to.
Governor Eric Holcomb this week announced that the mask mandate will now be a mask advisory, and he left it up to counties and cities to make their own decision. Here in Marion County, that's going to continue to be a mask mandate. Is the governor moving in the right direction here, or did he go maybe not far enough? Should he have made it mandatory that it's an advisory now across the state?
Well, I think he's left flexibility for locals to deal with issues that would pop up if they do. I think the capacity limits are a big a move forward for the state. We can start getting back to some of our larger events in a safe and healthy manner. And the metrics for the state continue to drive these decisions. The health outcomes, hospitalizations, positivity rates have allowed us, along with President Trump's developed vaccine, and Indiana, who is leading the country in getting vaccines into arms, have allowed us this opportunity. And I think as we get to the spring, into the summer, into the fall, we're going to be able to get back to normal with the level of vaccinations we're putting out there.
Let's get back to President Biden here for a moment. If you had to give him a grade, what would it be? First few months in office.
I mean, I would say F, but that's kind of cliche. I think he's doing a very poor job of putting American priorities first.
Kyle Hupfer, always good to see you, sir. Thank you for taking some time.
Great, thank you.
And coming up, we meet the new head of the Indiana Democrats and ask how he hopes to make the party competitive again throughout the state of Indiana. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics. We turn now to the new chairman for the Indiana Democratic Party. Party members elected Mike Schmuhl last weekend. He helped lead former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg's 2020 presidential campaign. He's with our Brooke Martin.
Mike, first of all, congratulations. We talked to you a few weeks ago when you announced your candidacy. Now you are the Indiana Democratic Party chair. What's first on the agenda, sir?
Well, it's getting to know the team. It's starting to raise the resources that we need to be competitive. And it's also coming up with a strategic plan. That's something that I ran on, bringing Democrats across our state together to focus on how we can change the balance of government and politics in the Hoosier State. And I can tell you that these conversations have been fruitful. They've been engaging. They've been constructive. There's a lot of excitement out there. I think there's a little bit of frustration too. But I hope to collaborate and coordinate with Democrats in every corner of the Hoosier State as we rebuild our party.
You've only been in the position about a week. What have you learned so far?
I think that there are a lot of people out there who are passionate Democrats who feel a little dispirited, actually, over the last few cycles. There's no question that we are in, sort of dire straits right now, but it hasn't always been the case, Brooke. I'm from South Bend, born and raised, and throughout my life, there's been a balance of Republicans and Democrats at all levels, governors and senators, state legislatures included. And I think that that's healthy in a political environment. I think that's healthy in any democracy or government. And so there is a little frustration, but I think people are hungry and excited to see something new and to start to rebuild our party in this decade. It's not going to be easy. We didn't slip into this position overnight, and we're not going to get out of it tomorrow or with the next election. But over time, I truly believe that we can rebuild our party so there's a two-party competitive system here in our state.
I want to go a little deeper into that. What are the winning issues for Democrats in Indiana?
To me, it's three big ones. Number one is an increase in the minimum wage and providing good-paying jobs for hardworking Hoosiers with protections. We've always been the party that has advocated for that. And really, at the end of the day, people want and deserve, a good-paying job that gives them purpose in life, a sense of dignity, and we will always fight for that. Number two is healthcare and the expansion of healthcare. We've been the party consistently that has stood up for your right to have healthcare, affordable healthcare, healthcare that doesn't break the bank, and so we will be sure to push for that, especially in the middle of a public health crisis. We had some good news this week, no question about it, but we need to come out of the pandemic in a way that is responsible and in a way that that gets us to the light at the end of the tunnel as safely as possible. So healthcare is number two. Number three is education. We're the party that has always stood up for a strong public education, and the party that's always advocated for paying teachers more. I think we need to do both in Indiana. Some of the biggest debates we've had over the last few years have been around education in our state. And I think that we need to put ourselves front and center and stay there on the issue of education. So those would be our top three as we get started.
I want to talk about the pandemic a little bit. Governor Holcomb, as you touched on this week, announced he's lifting COVID restrictions and the mask mandate April 6th. Tuesday night, the party released a statement seeming to praise the exit out of the pandemic and unified solutions to COVID-19. Wednesday, the party sends out a star op-ed calling the end to the mask mandate flat out dumb. Should the mask mandate end April 6th, or is it too early to do it?
I think it's too early, and I think that we did have welcome news this week when the governor said that vaccine ages would be lowered. There's no question that is good news. But I do think that we need to be responsible and continue to mask up as we get through the full vaccination period and people of all ages are vaccinated in our state. We have gone through this pandemic for 1 full year, and we are so close to the finish line. And I think that we need to really run through the tape to make sure that we reopen and that people can congregate and do so safely. I think it's a little premature to say that folks can, kind of get rid of the masks on April 6th. I will say another thing, Brooke, that I think is really important. And the governor has hinted at this, and some of his healthcare professionals have as well, that federal and state partnerships really matter. We're seeing what strong, competent, and steady leadership has done as it relates to tackling the pandemic. Joe Biden, as our president, has pushed through the American Rescue Plan, giving people, payments to get through this challenging time, lifting people out of poverty, earned income tax credit, vaccination availability and logistics across the country. That's really critical. And so the partnership at the federal level and the state level has really helped us get to where we are right now.
President Biden has been in office for 3 months now. What grade do you give him?
I think A. He's been, I think, very, very strong, and the approval rating showed that. We went through 4 years with Donald Trump and 2 of his campaigns, and kind of lived through the style of his politics. I would just say, it's refreshing in a way to have a president who is focused on solutions and not focused on bashing someone or name calling every single day. We have so many challenges before us as a country with public health and getting our economy back on track and infrastructure improvements. And he has done a great job, I think, bringing our country together and moving us through this challenging time.
Mike Schmuhl, Indiana Democratic Party.
And coming up, voting rights and election integrity. Indiana's Attorney General goes before Congress and the fight over new limits on mail-in voting in the Hoosier State. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics. This has been a big week in the debate over election laws. Let's start in Congress. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita testified before Congress Wednesday. He's asking senators to reject the Democratic-sponsored bill for sweeping changes nationally. S1 would expand registration and voting in federal elections, roll back voter ID requirements, and crack down on so-called dark money. Rokita says the bill would, in his words, turn the constitutional structure of elections on its head.
Many of the problems of 2020 resulted from the efforts of those without the authority to do so, trying to control how the election was run and changing election rules at the last minute. Regardless of which party or candidate a voter favors, all Americans should have confidence in the outcomes of their elections. No American's vote should be devalued by fraudulent votes. Should the act become law, I can tell you the sun won't set in Indiana before we sue the federal government, and I'm sure other states will join.
I take exception to the comments that you just made, Mr. Rokita, that public concern regarding the integrity of the recent election is born of anything but a deliberate and sustained misinformation campaign led by a vain former president unwilling to accept his own defeat. And I find it disturbing that a chief law enforcement officer from one of our great states would indulge in that kind of misinformation and spread those kinds of conspiracies when public confidence in the integrity of our elections is absolutely essential to sustaining our democracy. I want to turn for a moment now to the legislation before us.
A minute to respond to that?
No, you may not. I'd like to turn now for a moment to Ms. Mueller.
Senator Ossoff,
That's
just
rude.
give him 30 seconds to respond.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, Senator. I mean, that's true. I mean, if we're trying to have a constructive debate, you're not adding to it by cutting people off after invoking their name. I would say that you're entitled to your opinion, as misinformed as it may be, but I share the opinion of millions of Americans. The other difference between my opinion and yours is mine comes with the ability to file lawsuits.
And there you have it. Indiana lawmakers are set to hear a bill this coming week. It would limit powers by the state and election commission to expand mail-in absentee voting or to change election days in emergencies like the pandemic. Our Scott Sander is with State Senator Fadi Kadora.
Thanks for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Good morning. It's a pleasure being with you here.
Indiana House is set to hear a Senate bill that would put new limits on requesting absentee ballots by mail. Specifically changes made last year to make it easier to get a ballot through the mail. Do you believe it's a good or bad bill, and why?
Well, I appreciate the question. I think this bill falls under the national theme of 253 other bills that are moving across state houses in different states to restrict voting rights in Indiana and other places. Initially, the bill had citizenship requirements to register to vote. The bill limits the governor's ability and the Indiana Election Commission to regulate the time, the place, the manner of elections. And the bill also creates a very confusing new set of rules that basically if a voter registers using their driver's license and later they request an absentee ballot and they have to put some kind of credential and they end up putting their social security number, there will be a mismatch between their driver's license number and their social security number, and a voter might not be able to vote. They might be disregarded, and that takes their voting rights away. So I think this bill further restricts voting rights in Indiana at a time when we are considered one of the most strict states in the country as it relates to voting accessibility and voting rights.
Now, you've heard the complaints from those who say we should pass this bill and others like it, that governors, commissions, judges changed election rules without legislative input. Why should it not be then up to state lawmakers to make decisions on state elections?
I think state lawmakers should have input in the process and regulating the election law as it relates to Indiana. But I think there's a myth that has been promoted after the last election that the election has been stolen. A recent MIT study has shown that over the last 20 years, and I hope you're listening to these statistics, over the last 20 years, out of billions of ballots that were casted, that were evaluated, only 145, roughly speaking, 145 ballots that were deemed to be fraudulent over 20 years. And that translates into 0.00006% of all ballots that were cast in the last 20 years. So I think if we are to use data and science, the data and the science proves that basically these claims are more of a myth than a fact.
As you wrangle the State House, I'm sure you have your eye on Congress as well. There is a move to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Indiana's Attorney General is one of several that are fighting that effort. Frankly, do you believe the Republican Party is trying to suppress the vote?
I think there are definitely efforts that are driven by a national narrative, a national agenda that was promoted after the last elections that led to, unfortunately, the insurrection that took place at the Capitol, the lives that we lost because of this falsehood, of this myth that the elections was stolen, that is basically being translated into a political agenda on a state level across the country. We were not elected to advance national political agendas here in Indiana. I think Hoosiers deserve better. And here in Indiana, we should do what is best for Hoosiers and not watch and follow what, Mitch McConnell or anybody else on a national level is telling state parties to do. I think Hoosiers deserve better.
State Senator Fadi Kadora, who represents the 30th District as a Democrat, thank you for the time.
It's an honor to be with you. I appreciate you, Scott.
Take all Indiana politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics on this Sunday. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. Have a great rest of your weekend.